Imagine you decide to go for a walk. Nothing dramatic, no marathon, no steep mountain trail, no stopwatch counting your pace. Just a simple, ordinary walk down the street, the kind of walk people take without thinking about it. You step outside, shift your weight forward, and take that first step. Then another. Then another. It feels almost trivial. In fact, it feels so natural that it barely seems worth analyzing. Walking is something you learned as a child, something your body does automatically. You don't calculate angles or forces. You don't consciously command each muscle fiber. It just happens. But here's where things become interesting. From a physicist's point of view, something deeply complex is unfolding beneath that simplicity. Something so fundamental that it connects your casual walk to the same laws that govern stars, planets, and the entire universe. Each step you take begins with energy stored inside your body. This energy comes from food, molecules that your body has broken down and reorganized through chemical processes. These molecules store energy in their bonds, and when your muscles contract, that stored energy is released. Now, you might think that energy is mainly used to push you forward. That seems obvious. You walk, so energy must be turning into motion. But that's only part of the story, and not even the largest part. A surprisingly small fraction of that energy actually becomes the forward motion of your body. Most of it goes somewhere else. It spreads out into your surroundings in forms that are much harder to notice. Your muscles generate heat. Your body temperature rises slightly. The air around you warms by an almost imperceptible amount. Your feet press against the ground, creating tiny vibrations that travel through the surface beneath you. Even the air you move through is disturbed, its molecules nudged into new, unpredictable patterns. So while it feels like you are simply moving forward, what you are really doing is transforming concentrated, organized energy into dispersed, less organized forms. This idea has a precise meaning in physics. It's called entropy. Entropy is often described as a measure of disorder, but that word can be misleading. A better way to think about it is this. Entropy measures how spread out energy becomes, how many different ways a system can arrange itself. When energy is tightly packed and organized, like in the chemical bonds of your body, it has low entropy. When that same energy spreads out as heat into the environment, it has higher entropy. And here's the crucial point. Every step you take increases entropy. Not because you're doing something inefficient or wasteful, but because that's simply how the laws of physics work. Energy transformations naturally move in the direction of greater dispersion. There are more ways for energy to be spread out than there are for it to remain tightly organized. So your walk, as simple as it feels, is part of a much larger pattern. You are taking structured energy from your body and redistributing it into the world around you, step by step, moment by moment. What feels like a quiet, ordinary activity is actually a continuous process of energy transformation that subtly reshapes the state of the universe with every movement you make. Now consider a simple comparison. Imagine two versions of you existing under nearly identical conditions. In one version, you spend 30 minutes sitting quietly in a chair. In the other, you spend those same 30 minutes walking at a steady, comfortable pace. Nothing extreme, just the kind of walk you wouldn't even think twice about. At first glance, the difference seems obvious. One version is active, the other is not. One covers distance, the other stays in place. But if you look at it through the lens of physics, those differences are almost superficial. The deeper question is this: what has changed in the physical state of the world between these two scenarios? In both cases, your body is using energy. Even sitting still, your heart is beating, your lungs are moving, your brain is active. Energy is being consumed and transformed continuously. You are never truly at rest in a thermodynamic sense. But when you walk, something additional happens. You increase the rate at which energy is transformed and dispersed. Your muscles contract repeatedly, demanding more chemical energy. That energy doesn't stay neatly contained within your body. It begins to spread outward in multiple forms. Your body produces more heat, which flows into the surrounding air. The ground beneath your feet experiences tiny impacts with every step, sending faint vibrations outward. The air shifts around your moving body, creating small, chaotic disturbances in the motion of molecules. None of these effects are dramatic on their own. They are subtle, almost invisible, but they are real, measurable, and cumulative. So the key difference between sitting and walking is not just motion. It is the degree to which you are redistributing energy into your environment. When you walk, you are increasing the number of possible microscopic arrangements of energy in the world around you. In other words, you are increasing entropy more rapidly. This idea can feel abstract, so it helps to think in terms of probability. Imagine all the ways energy can exist in a system. There are relatively few ways for energy to remain concentrated and organized, like it is inside the structured chemistry of your body. But there are vastly more ways for that same energy to be spread out among countless molecules in the air, the ground, and your surroundings. So when you walk, you are not just moving forward. You are pushing the system towards states that are statistically more likely. You are participating in a process that naturally favors dispersion over concentration. In contrast, when you sit still, this process continues, but at a slower pace. Energy is still being used and released, but less of it is being actively redistributed through large-scale motion. What's fascinating is that, from your subjective experience, the walking version feels purposeful. You might say, I walked to get somewhere, or I walked for exercise. Those explanations make sense at the human level. But from a purely physical perspective, both versions of you are doing the same fundamental thing: converting organized energy into less organized forms. The difference is simply how quickly and how widely that conversion spreads. This reveals a subtle disconnect between how we experience reality and how it is described by physics. We think in terms of intention and outcome. Physics describes processes in terms of energy and probability. Your walk has meaning to you, but to the underlying laws of nature, it is part of a continuous, impersonal shift toward greater entropy. Walking feels easy in a way that hides almost everything that matters about it. You don't feel the equations, the forces, or the delicate instabilities you're constantly correcting. You feel something smooth, continuous, almost effortless. But that feeling is a kind of illusion created by your brain. Underneath that illusion, walking is a highly dynamic and unstable process. To see this more clearly, imagine freezing time in the middle of a step. One foot is on the ground, the other is moving forward. Your body is slightly tilted. Your center of mass is not directly above your supporting foot, it's ahead of it. From a purely mechanical point of view, this is not a stable position. If you were a rigid object in that configuration, you would simply fall forward. And in a sense, that is exactly what you are doing. Walking is often described as a controlled fall, and that description is more literal than it sounds. You lean forward, gravity begins to pull you down, and before you collapse, you place your other foot in front to catch yourself. Then you repeat the process, over and over again. So instead of maintaining balance in a static way, like a statue, you maintain balance dynamically, by constantly preventing a fall that is always about to happen. This requires precise timing and coordination. Your brain and nervous system are continuously adjusting muscle forces, joint angles, and timing with remarkable accuracy. These adjustments happen in fractions of a second, far below the level of conscious awareness. You are not thinking, contract this muscle by this amount at this exact moment. If you had to do that consciously, you wouldn't be able to walk at all. Instead, your body handles an enormous amount of complexity automatically. It integrates sensory information from your eyes, inner ear, muscles, and joints. It predicts where your body will be a moment later and prepares the necessary corrections in advance. From a physics perspective, this is a system constantly responding to instability. Every step involves forces. Gravity pulling you downward, the ground pushing back up, friction preventing your foot from slipping, muscles generating internal forces to control motion. These forces are not perfectly balanced. They are continuously shifting. Walking works not because everything is stable, but because instability is managed in a controlled way. And this control comes at a cost. Each adjustment your body makes requires energy. Muscles contract, even if only slightly, to maintain posture and guide movement. Tiny corrections happen all the time, most of which you never notice. That energy doesn't remain neatly contained. As before, much of it is dissipated as heat. Some of it contributes to motion, but a large portion is lost in the process of maintaining control over an inherently unstable system. So the ease you feel while walking is not the absence of effort. It is the result of an incredibly efficient system that hides its own complexity. Your brain filters out the struggle. It presents you with a simplified experience: smooth motion, steady balance, effortless steps. But underneath that experience, you are constantly negotiating with gravity, correcting errors, and preventing collapse. Walking is not a simple, stable action, it is a continuous act of recovery. There's something unexpectedly elegant about the way humans walk. Not elegant in the artistic sense, but in the way a good physical system often is: simple on the surface, yet quietly making use of deep principles. If you look closely, walking is not just a sequence of muscle contractions pushing you forward. It is structured in a way that reduces the amount of energy you need to use. Your body is not just expending energy, it is managing it, recycling parts of it, and letting physics do some of the work for free. One of the most important ideas here is that your body behaves in certain ways like a pendulum. When one foot is on the ground and your body moves over it, your center of mass rises slightly. then falls as you move forward. This up and down motion might seem inefficient at first, but it allows energy to shift between different forms. At the highest point, you have more gravitational potential energy and less kinetic energy. As you descend, that potential energy converts back into motion. This exchange reduces how much new energy your muscles need to supply. Instead of generating all motion from scratch, your body takes advantage of this natural oscillation. At the same time, your swinging leg behaves a bit like a free-moving pendulum. Once it starts moving, it doesn't require constant force to keep going. Its motion is guided by inertia and gravity, with your muscles stepping in mainly to start and stop the swing and to control its timing. So rather than forcing every part of the motion, your body allows certain movements to happen naturally and only intervenes where necessary. This is what makes walking relatively efficient compared to many other forms of movement. You are not constantly fighting against physical laws. You are cooperating with them, but this efficiency has limits. Even in this carefully structured system, energy is constantly being lost. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, unavoidable amounts. When your foot strikes the ground, some energy is absorbed and dissipated. Muscles are not perfectly efficient. They convert chemical energy into mechanical work, but also release a significant portion as heat, friction, internal resistance in tissues, and the imperfect elasticity of your body all contribute to these losses. Because of this, your body must continually supply new energy to keep you moving. Without that input, the system would gradually slow down and stop, just like a pendulum eventually comes to rest if no additional energy is added. So even though walking makes clever use of energy transfer and natural motion, it cannot escape the broader rule. Energy spreads out, and useful, organized motion degrades over time unless it is constantly replenished. What's fascinating is that this balance between conserving energy and losing it is finely tuned. Small changes in how you walk can alter your efficiency. Walking too fast or too slow, taking steps that are too long or too short, all of these can increase the energy cost. Somewhere in between, there is a natural rhythm where your body's structure, gravity, and motion align in a way that minimizes effort. You usually find this rhythm without thinking. It feels like your normal walking pace. But what you are really doing is settling into a pattern where physics works with you as much as possible, even though it never stops quietly taking energy away. There is a point where it becomes necessary to be honest about the limits of our understanding. Walking seems familiar, almost too familiar to question, and yet when you begin to examine it carefully, it opens into a set of problems that are not fully solved. We know a great deal about the mechanics involved. We can measure forces in the joints, track the motion of limbs with high precision, and calculate how energy is used and dissipated. We understand the role of muscles, tendons, and bones. We can even build machines that imitate aspects of human walking, and in controlled environments, those machines can perform quite well. But knowing how to describe something is not the same as fully understanding it. For example, the human body is remarkably good at optimizing movement. Without conscious effort, you tend to walk in a way that minimizes energy use. If you try to deliberately change your stride, make it longer, shorter, faster, or slower, you will quickly feel the difference. It becomes uncomfortable or inefficient. Then, almost automatically, you drift back to a more natural pattern. This suggests that your nervous system is solving an optimization problem in real time. It is continuously adjusting your movement to reduce energy cost while maintaining stability and forward motion. We can observe this behavior. We can measure the outcomes. But the underlying process, how the brain actually performs this optimization, is not fully understood. The brain is coordinating signals across billions of neurons, integrating sensory feedback from multiple sources, and predicting the consequences of each movement before it happens. It does all of this quickly enough to keep you from falling, and efficiently enough that you rarely notice the effort. There is no simple equation that captures this entire process. Another open question is why biological systems are so effective at this kind of coordination in the first place. Evolution provides a broad explanation. Systems that move efficiently are more likely to survive, but it does not fully explain the detailed mechanisms that emerge. Even with modern technology, replicating human walking in machines remains difficult. Robots can be designed to walk, but they often lack the adaptability and efficiency that humans display naturally. Small changes in terrain, balance, or timing can cause problems that a human would handle without thinking. This gap highlights something important. There is a difference between engineered solutions and evolved ones. The human body is not designed from scratch with a clear blueprint. It is the result of countless incremental changes over long periods of time, shaped by constraints we do not completely understand. And then there is the role of consciousness. You are aware that you are walking. You can decide to start or stop. You can change direction, but the detailed control of the movement itself, happens largely outside of conscious awareness. Why is that? Why is such a complex physical process paired with such a simple subjective experience? You do not experience the calculations, the corrections, or the energy management. You experience something smooth and continuous, as if walking were fundamentally simple. This creates a gap between reality as it is described by physics and biology, and reality as it experienced from the inside. We know many of the pieces involved in walking, but when you try to put them all together, mechanics, control, optimization, adaptation, and subjective experience, the full picture is still incomplete, and that incompleteness is not a failure. It is a reminder that even the most ordinary actions can sit on top of layers of complexity that we are still in the process of uncovering. There is a subtle difficulty in thinking clearly about something like walking, and it has less to do with physics itself and more to do with how human thinking is structured. When you describe why you walk, your explanation naturally takes the form of purpose. You might say you are going somewhere, or improving your health, or simply passing time. These are meaningful explanations at the level of human experience. They are not wrong, but they belong to a different layer of description than the one physics uses. Physics does not ask what something is for. It asks what is happening. From that perspective, walking is not about goals or intentions. It is about energy being transformed, forces interacting, and systems evolving over time according to consistent rules. There is no built-in concept of purpose in those rules. This creates a kind of tension between two ways of understanding the same event. On one hand, there is the internal human explanation. I chose to walk. On the other, there is the physical description, a chain of causes and effects governed by the properties of matter and energy. Both descriptions are valid within their own contexts, but they do not easily fit together. The difficulty arises when we try to merge them into a single unified picture. Part of the problem is that human intuition did not evolve to understand abstract concepts like energy distribution or entropy. It evolved to deal with immediate practical concerns, finding food, avoiding danger, navigating environments. As a result, we are very good at thinking in terms of objects, actions, and goals, but not in terms of probability distributions or microscopic states. When you hear that walking increases entropy, it can feel distant or even irrelevant. The concept does not map easily onto everyday experience. You do not perceive entropy directly. You perceive motion, effort, temperature, and balance. So there is a gap between what is physically real and what is psychologically accessible. Another source of difficulty is scale. The processes that define entropy and energy distribution happen at levels far smaller than what you can see. They involve enormous numbers of particles, air molecules, atoms in your body, vibrations in the ground, all interacting in ways that are individually unpredictable but collectively structured. Your brain does not track these microscopic details. It compresses information, ignoring almost everything that does not directly affect your immediate experience. This simplification is necessary for survival, but it comes at the cost of hiding the deeper structure of reality. Because of this, the world you experience feels cleaner and more purposeful than the world described by physics. There is also the issue of language. Words like disorder or randomness carry everyday meanings that do not quite match their scientific definitions. This can lead to misunderstandings. When physicists talk about increasing entropy, they are not saying that things become chaotic in a visible sense. They are describing a shift in the number of possible configurations at a microscopic level. That distinction is subtle, and it is not something intuition handles easily. So when you try to fully grasp what is happening during a simple walk, you run into multiple layers of difficulty. Your natural way of thinking emphasizes purpose and simplicity. The physical description emphasizes process and complexity. The scale of the underlying phenomena is far removed from direct perception, and the language used to describe it does not align perfectly with everyday understanding. All of this makes it challenging to hold a clear, unified picture in your mind. And yet, that challenge points to something important. It suggests that the ordinary way we experience the world is not a complete representation of how the world actually works. Now push the idea further by changing your point of view. Instead of seeing the walk from inside your own experience, imagine observing it from very far away. Not just a few meters above, but far enough that your individual features disappear. Your body becomes just another physical system among many, no different in principle from a moving object on a landscape. From that distance, something interesting happens. The details you normally focus on, your thoughts, your intentions, even the idea that you are walking, begin to fade. What remains are patterns of energy and motion. Your body is taking in chemical energy, converting it into mechanical motion and heat, and interacting with its surroundings. The ground pushes back against your feet. The air flows around you. Small amounts of energy radiate outward in all directions. None of this depends on your awareness. It would occur in the same way whether you were paying attention or not. If you zoom out even further, the picture becomes more abstract. The Earth itself is moving, rotating, and orbiting. The energy you use while walking ultimately traces back to the sun, which drives the processes that produced your food. The heat you release does not disappear. It spreads into the atmosphere and eventually radiates into space. Your walk becomes part of a much larger chain of energy transformations. From this perspective, it no longer makes sense to isolate the action as something separate or self-contained. It is one small event within a continuous flow that extends far beyond you. And yet, even though the large-scale picture seems smooth and continuous, the details are not. At a microscopic level, every step you take creates tiny disturbances. When your foot touches the ground, it sends vibrations through the material beneath you. These vibrations move outward, interacting with other particles, scattering and gradually dissipating. The air you displace behaves in a similar way. Molecules collide, change direction and transfer energy in ways that are individually unpredictable. The exact path of any single particle is impossible to track in practice, and even in principle, it becomes uncertain due to the limits of measurement and sensitivity to initial conditions. So while the overall behavior follows clear physical laws, the fine details quickly become too complex to follow precisely. This leads to an important idea. Even simple actions generate complexity that spreads and amplifies over time. A single step changes the state of the world in ways that cannot be perfectly reversed. Not because reversal is forbidden in theory, but because it would require reconstructing an enormous amount of detailed information that is effectively lost as energy disperses. The effects of your movement propagate outward, becoming part of the background of countless other processes. They mix with thermal motion, environmental noise, and interactions on every scale. From a human perspective, these changes are negligible. They do not alter your daily experience in any noticeable way. But from a physical perspective, they are real and irreversible. So your walk is not just a localized event. It is a point where energy flows, spreads, and becomes entangled with the broader state of the universe. Seen this way, the boundary between you and everything else becomes less clear. Your actions are not isolated. They are continuous with the environment, influencing and being influenced at the same time. What feels like a simple, contained activity is actually woven into a much larger and more intricate process. There is a natural tendency to feel that when you walk, you are the one in control. You decide to start, you decide where to go, you decide when to stop. That sense of control is real at the level of experience. It is how you navigate the world. But when you look more closely at the physical process, the idea becomes less clear and more constrained than it first appears. Every movement you make is shaped by conditions you did not choose. Gravity is always present, pulling you toward the ground with a force you cannot turn off. The structure of your body, your bones, muscles, joints, limits the ways in which you can move. Friction between your feet and the ground determines whether you can walk at all. Even the air, which seems almost irrelevant, exerts resistance that slightly alters your motion. You are not selecting from an unlimited set of possibilities. You are operating within a narrow range of motions that are physically allowed and biologically feasible. Consider what would happen if any one of these constraints changed. If gravity were significantly stronger, walking in its current form might become impossible. If friction disappeared, your feet would slip with every step. If your muscles could not generate force efficiently, you would not be able to maintain balance. So while it feels like you are freely choosing to walk, your choices are deeply shaped by the structure of the physical world. Even within those constraints, your body does not behave like a simple machine executing a fixed plan. It constantly adapts. Small variations in the ground, slight shifts in balance, unexpected disturbances. All of these require immediate responses. These responses are not fully under conscious control. They arise from complex interactions within your nervous system, informed by sensory input and past experience. You do not calculate the precise correction needed when you step on an uneven surface. The adjustment happens automatically, often before you are even aware that something has changed. This suggests that what you experience as deliberate control is layered on top of processes that are largely automatic. There is also the question of predictability. If you tried to describe your next 10 steps in complete physical detail, the exact forces, positions, and timings, you would quickly run into difficulty. Not because the system is random, but because it is extremely sensitive to small variations. Tiny differences in initial conditions can lead to slightly different outcomes, which then propagate forward. From a practical standpoint, your movement is only predictable within a certain range. Beyond that, the complexity becomes too great to track precisely. This does not mean that walking is chaotic in the everyday sense. It remains stable and reliable at the level you experience. But underneath that stability lies a system that is constantly adjusting, never repeating itself in exactly the same way. So the control you feel is real, but it is not absolute. It is better understood as guidance within constraints. You set a general direction and intention, but the details are handled by a network of physical and biological processes that operate according to their own rules. And within those rules, there is a consistent pattern. Maintaining your organized motion requires continuous input of energy, and that input inevitably leads to energy being spread out into the environment. You are at the same time maintaining order in your movement and contributing to disorder beyond it. This dual role, local control within global constraints, bridges something essential about how living systems operate. You are not separate from the laws of physics. You are one of the ways those laws express themselves under particular conditions. The feeling of control is part of that expression, not something that exists outside of it. There is a deeper tension hidden inside all of this, and it becomes clearer when you consider what it means for something to be alive. Your body, at this moment, is highly organized. Its structure is not random. Cells are arranged in specific ways, tissues perform specialized functions, and countless processes are coordinated to maintain stability. This level of order does not happen by accident, and more importantly, it does not sustain itself without continuous effort. If you were to stop supplying energy to your body, that organization would begin to break down. Gradually at first, then irreversibly. The structure you take for granted depends on a constant flow of energy. Walking makes this dependency more visible. As you move, your body is actively maintaining its internal organization. Muscles contract in coordinated patterns, your balance is preserved, your temperature is regulated. All of this requires energy input, and that energy must come from somewhere. But here is where the situation becomes less intuitive. The same process that allows you to maintain order within your body also increases disorder outside of it. Every step you take releases heat into the environment. Energy that was once stored in a structured, useful form becomes dispersed among countless molecules in the air and ground. This energy is still there. It has not disappeared, but it is no longer concentrated in a way that can easily be used to perform work. So there is a kind of trade taking place. You preserve and maintain a small region of order, your body, by exporting disorder into the larger environment. This is not unique to walking. It is true of all living processes. But walking provides a clear and immediate example, because the energy flow is more pronounced. From a physical standpoint, this behavior is not optional. It follows directly from the laws governing energy and entropy. Systems naturally evolve towards states where energy is more spread out, not less. To resist that tendency locally, a system must draw in energy and release entropy elsewhere. Your body does exactly that. It takes in low-entropy energy in the form of food, processes it through complex biochemical pathways, and releases higher-entropy energy into the surroundings. The difference between these two states is what allows your internal structure to persist. This creates a kind of asymmetry. Inside your body, processes are tightly regulated, coordinated, and structured. Outside your body, the energy you release becomes part of a much less organized system. It mixes with the environment, losing any trace of its original form. And yet, both sides are part of the same continuous process. The boundary between inside and outside is physically real, but it does not isolate you from the larger system. It simply defines where certain processes are more controlled and where they are less so. This leads to an interesting perspective. Life does not oppose the general trend toward increasing entropy. It works within it. It creates temporary pockets of order by accelerating the overall process of energy dispersion. In other words, your ability to remain structured depends on making the universe, as a whole, slightly more disordered. When you walk, this process becomes more active. You increase the rate at which energy flows through your body and into the environment. You are, in a very literal sense, sustaining your organization by participating more intensely in this exchange. What feels like a simple act of movement is also part of a broader balance, one in which order and disorder are not opposites, but interconnected aspects of the same underlying process.